only 6 weeks into his second term, and President Trump is already taking a victory lap. He addressed a joint session of Congress and the American people tonight, and in a record-long speech highlighted his accomplishments so far. But Democrats see a very different picture, and KCAL News political reporter Tom Wade is here now to begin our in-depth coverage. Hold on.
Pat, I think you spelled it out just right. There's two different realities in this country right now for a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
People see things very differently. So Mr. Trump, fully in charge of a Republican-controlled Congress, made dozens of claims tonight about his first 6 weeks in office, boasting that he's reduced waste and fraud, celebrating the tariffs that he slapped on Mexico and Canada, claiming they will grow the economy and lower prices, and claiming he is well on his way to ending the war between Russia and Ukraine. But Democrats in the Capitol tonight were having none of it. In a House intensely divided, that was on full display.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
President Trump making his triumphant return to the Capitol. About 6 weeks into his second term, delivering his first joint address to Congress.
We have accomplished more in 43 days than most administrations accomplished in 4 years or 8 years.
Trump's appearance before Congress once again highlighted deep divisions between Republicans and Democrats. Those tensions boiled over as Trump boasted about his election victory and made claims about the economy, setting off boos and yelling from Democrats, and led to the removal of Texas Democrat Al Green.
All business optimism saw its single largest one-month gain ever recorded, a 41-point jump.
Members are directed to uphold and maintain decorum in the House and to cease any further disruptions. Remove this gentleman from the chamber.
Trump's speech was wide-ranging and laid out his populist mission to dramatically reinvent the federal government.
And the next phase of our plan to deliver the greatest economy in history is for this Congress to pass tax cuts for everybody. They're in there. They're waiting for you to vote.
Border security, a cornerstone of Trump's re-election campaign, took center stage. Trump featuring Alexis Nunguri, a mother of a 12-year-old Texas girl allegedly murdered by Venezuelan immigrants who entered the country illegally.
Since taking office, my administration has launched the most sweeping border and immigration crackdown in American history, and we quickly achieved the lowest numbers of illegal border crossers ever recorded. Thank you.
Trump also addressed the trade war sparked by tariffs he's imposed on China, Canada, and Mexico. Trump doubling down on the policy despite warnings from many economists who warn they could lead the country into a recession.
April 2nd, reciprocal tariffs kick in, and whatever they tariff us, other countries, we will tariff them.
On inflation,
to further combat inflation, we will not only be reducing the cost of energy, but will be ending the flagrant waste of taxpayer dollars.
But many leading financial experts deeply concerned about inflation rising because of the tariffs. On deteriorating relations between Ukraine and the White House, Trump says Ukraine reached out.
Earlier today, I received an important letter from President Zelensky of Ukraine. The letter reads, Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible.
Senator Elissa Slotkin from Michigan gave the Democratic Party's response to the president's address. She criticized his proposed tariffs and the ones that are already in place, as well as Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency.
His tariffs on allies like Canada will raise prices on energy, lumber, and cars, and start a trade war that will hurt manufacturing and farmers. Your premiums and prescriptions will cost more because the math on his proposals doesn't work without going after your health care. The president claims he won't, but Elon Musk just called Social Security the biggest Ponzi scheme of all time. While we're on the subject of Elon Musk, is there anyone in America who is comfortable with him and his gang of 20-year-olds using their own computer servers to poke through your tax returns, your health information, and your bank accounts?
Ending waste and fraud and abuse was a constant phrase tonight. Trump, for example, claimed Social Security is full of fraud, sending checks to millions of people who are actually dead, including millions who are over 140 years old. But fact checkers say that claim, like many Trump makes, are just not true. The Federal Inspector General's office found Social Security's fraud rate for the last decade is under 1%. Pat.
All right, thanks so much for that, Tom. And we do have analysis now. Joining us is veteran LA City and County Leader Zev Yaroslavsky. Zev is now the director of the Los Angeles Initiative at the UCLA Luskin School of Public Affairs. So let's continue with one of the main topics tonight, Zev, the economy. This speech came less than 24 hours after tariffs on imports from Mexico, Canada, and China went into effect. Tonight, the president said there will be some disturbances from the tariffs, but, quote, we are okay with that. So, Zev, I'd like to get your thoughts on those tariffs.
Well, we'll see whether we're okay with that. Look, he's made tariffs almost a religion for him, and virtually every economist in the country, and certainly the stock market, don't agree with him. When you slap tariffs on Canada, Mexico, China, the people who are going to end up paying for it are the consumers here at home, and the inflationary pressures are going to be significant. And look, we talk about the housing shortage. Some of the biggest chunk of lumber we get, imported lumber, is from Canada. To build a house in the United States, in California, Southern California, the cost of lumber is going to cause the cost of housing to go up. And so it goes. So I think there's a real debate. Actually, it's not much of a debate. He believes in tariffs. The economy doesn't. And we'll see how that plays out. It's not going to just be a minor disturbance. I'm not sure it's going to, I'm not sure he's going to go through with this to the extent that he's talking about, but he sure sounded like it tonight, though.
Yes, he did say April 2nd is when reciprocal tariffs will start. But, Zev,
Yeah.
After the contentious White House meeting last week between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and President Trump, in his speech tonight, the president said he has been in communication with Zelensky and sort of hinted that some sort of deal could be back on the table after talking with Russia. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's good news that they're talking again, or they're communicating again. And you know, Zelensky has been in a mess of a situation. His country was invaded 3 years ago, and the president of the United States says that it was Ukraine that provoked the invasion. If you go beyond Ukraine, our whole foreign policy, as articulated by President Trump, is being turned on its head. The national security establishment, Democrats and Republicans, military people, are concerned that we are accepting at face value what Putin says, and we blast the heck out of our ally, Zelensky. And the Western Europeans feel the same way. I'm glad that they're talking again. The question that the Ukrainians are going to have to ask, and that we have to ask, is once this deal is made, what is the guarantee that there isn't going to be another incursion by the Russians? They have violated ceasefires multiple times since their first incursion back in 20 years ago to Ukraine, to Crimea, and then to the eastern part of Ukraine, et cetera. So, but it's a good thing that they're talking again.
Well, Zev, you know, tonight, we've seen this before, a reminder of just how deep the political divide is in Washington. Democratic Representative Al Green of Texas was removed from the House chamber for disrupting. I don't know if we've seen that before, Zev. And other Democrats held up signs that read false as the president was speaking. So what do you think about this particular disruption, or how the Democrats reacted tonight to the speech? Or to the address?
Well, I don't think Congressman Green did himself any good, or did the Democrats any favors by doing what he did, by disrupting the speech. You know, and I think it's what Washington has come to these days, that to get attention you have to do something like that. I just didn't think that was that wasn't respectful of the institution. And both parties over the years have have engaged in some antics on the floor of the House when they've done this, and it's gotten worse and worse. And I was sorry to see that. On the other hand, I thought Congresswoman's she was elected senator. Senator Slotkin's speech, the rebuttal speech after President Trump's speech, was one of the best I've ever heard from in a rebuttal speech. One of the most difficult speeches to give, whether you're Democrat or Republican, is to follow the President of the United States after he gives a State of the Union address, to rise to that occasion. I thought she did a pretty good job. And the message she was talking to Middle America. She was talking to Michigan and to the Michigans across the country, which I think is what the Democrats need to do to broaden their base. And what Trump was doing tonight was talking to his base, which got him elected twice. And he's a believer that by talking to the base and energizing the base, that he actually expands his base within that universe. So I thought both Slotkin and President Trump did what they set out to do tonight.
All right. Well, Zev, as always, we want to thank you for your insight.